Hello there, my name is Mel and you're watching Growing Together. In this video I'm going to recommend some books that are fantastic for kids to read by themselves or for you to read to your kids. I've chosen 4 books today, so let's just go. The first one of these is called The Winky Donkey, Words and Music by Craig Smith, illustrations by Kat Cowley. So I don't know how many people would have seen on YouTube there is a video with Craig Smith doing this song, performing this song. So I will link the video for that below. But basically this is a really sweet, really clever, really cute little story. It's kind of one of those rhyming stories that repeats itself. So I'll just read the first little bit of it to you. I was walking down the road and I saw a donkey. Hee-haw. He only had 3 legs and 1 eye. He was a Winky Donkey. And then the next page, I was walking down the road and I saw a donkey. Hee-haw. He only had 3 legs, 1 eye, and he liked to listen to country music. He was a honky-tonky, winky donkey, and on it goes. And we keep adding and getting information about the wonky donkey. I just think that it's a really fun way of teaching children about rhyming and having fun with words and language. The illustrations are also completely adorable. We get a real sense of the character of this donkey and how much of a cool dude, mischievous donkey he is. Because the words are repeated, it helps the children to really focus on the rhyming and the language and pick up words and language and that rhythm and rhyme from these kinds of nursery rhymes, which I think is really great. It is a favourite of children from about 4 up to about 7 that I have taught and read this book to, although children as young as 6 months will really enjoy the repetition and the really lovely illustrations. So I really recommend The Winky Donkey by Craig Smith and illustrated by Kat Cowley. The next 2 books that I want to show you, so the first of these is The Water Tower. They're both written by Gary Crew and illustrated by Stephen Woolman. And even though they're picture books, there's a lot of things in here, both the illustrations and the text, that will really appeal to children from probably about, say, 7 through to like 13 or 14. If they are older, say 11 through to 14, they will need to be using this as a springboard for sort of lesson planning more than just to read, because it's a little bit above their reading level. But I still think that they would definitely appreciate the intent behind the story and the overarching concept. As you can see from the cover, it is somewhat of a creepy story, so I wouldn't necessarily recommend it for children under about 5, but from 5 upwards I would think they'd be okay with it. So we start out actually turning the page so that it sits like that, and then you can see here there's this little illustration here, and these illustrations actually continue throughout the story, throughout the pages, and you always can see the water tower on all of the pages, so you know that whatever is going on has something to do with the water tower. So for a few pages we read like this, and as you can see we start to get a little bit more creepy. The water in the water tower is quite dark and greenish, sort of has that weird unearthly glow. And then, like I said, we continue with that circular pattern, and that's actually quite important because I don't know how well you can see on the image of the water tower, but there's actually a circular picture on the water tower, and that sort of circular pattern continues throughout the book as well. As you can see here, we're getting more of a sense of how sinister and eerie this is. All of the tendrils of the water spreading out seem to look almost like hands or something reaching into the water, reaching for this child that is climbing up the water tower. A few pages on, the actual structure of the book starts changing. So where we held it like this before, we now hold it like this. And I think that's actually a really interesting structure that will make children quite interested to look at the story and read the story. So there's a lot more going on in this book than you would expect from just a picture book. And then we have more like a cartoon structure, storyboard structure, and I don't know how well you can see the eyes of these people, but there's something very sinister happening here. Again, we turn, so it's keeping us a little bit off balance and a little bit unsure of what to make of what's happening, and that just adds to the overall eeriness and sinister feeling of the story. You can see what I mean about the eyes in this picture a lot better. Can you see on the hat is actually an imprint of the same circular pattern that was on the water tower? So you know that something's going on to do with the water tower. And then in the circular pattern that has still continued, we now get to see the main character, who was the boy at the beginning of the story that climbed into the water tower, and see his expressions. And now we have just a page that is just illustration. And in the eye is that same circular. This picture shows a child who's quite distressed. And this is where I always have to look to see which way to turn. And now we have him coming out of the water tower with that similar look in his eyes that we had from all those townsfolk before. So that was the water tower. The next one is beneath the surface. And as you can see, we've still got the water tower on the front cover, and we've still got that same really sort of murky green atmosphere behind the water tower. And we start out turning the page in the same way, and you can see that same circular pattern. So this book is about Spyro, who was one of the boys that climbed the water tower in the water tower. And he has returned to his hometown where the water tower is, and it's about, I think, 10 or 11 years later, and he is a scientist, and he's returned to see if he can make anything of what happened when he was a child and what's going on. So another thing that I think is really genius about these two books is that they actually begin in a very similar fashion. So I'll read the first page of the water tower to you, and then the first page of Beneath the Surface, and you'll see what I mean. Nobody in Preston could remember when the water tower was built, or who had built it, but there it stood on Shooter's Hill, its iron legs rusted, its egg-shaped tank warped and leaking, casting a long, dark shadow across the valley, across Preston itself. So that was the water tower. Nobody in Preston could remember when the water tower was built, or who had built it, but there it stood on Shooter's Hill, its mighty stanchions planted deep within the earth, its long dark shadow stretching far across the valley, beyond Preston itself. Far beyond. And that was Beneath the Surface. So as you can see, there's something very strange about this water tower. So again, we have that overall atmosphere of creepiness and fear. And again, we get that same circular pattern that appeared on the water tower. And have a look at these eyes. That's that same pattern. So it starts out with Spyro in the hotel, and we hear what he's doing and we see what he's doing. Then we come to this page, and it's just almost straight out of some kind of horror movie. No text, just horrifying pictures. And now this is where this book starts to get quite interesting and quite different from the water tower, because the text talks about Spyro, but the pictures don't. Except here, where we have a little comic strip sort of panel in that same shape, that circular kind of shape that shows Spyro, but all of the pictures show different people around the world, and as you can see from their eyes, something is very strange. We continue to the next page and it's the same thing. We have text about Spyro and what Spyro is doing, and then we have people, this time very obviously very different people, that same weird thing with their eyes, and a little picture of Spyro going to the water tower. And it continues on as the book goes on, all around different parts of the world. So you can see that whatever happened, whatever started the water tower didn't stay, which is what the beginning of the book indicated would happen. And then we have some kind of very sinister round table meeting. And again, the same thing. Picture of just the eye. Very similar to the water tower. Both these books end quite mysteriously. This one ends in quite a sinister fashion, which is why I think that it's probably not really appropriate for anyone under the age of 5, and even 5 to 7 would be probably a little bit risky. You'd have to really talk to them about what they were going to view. But like I said before, I really love these books because I think that they're really interestingly structured and really interestingly written, and really love the way that the illustrations, particularly in this book, I love the way they don't match up to the text, and I think it's a really great way of helping children to develop an understanding that you need to really read a book without necessarily just reading the words. You need to come to a book with an understanding of the context. You need to come to a book with an ability to read beyond the actual just the words. So I think that they're really well written for that, and they're just fantastic books. And even if it's not about learning, they're just really fun, interesting books to read, and they'll certainly keep children, like I said, even up to the age of sort of 10, really, really engaged with their general overall kind of creepiness and weirdness and mysteriousness, and the fact that they don't really give you an ending, which actually is really exciting. And the last book I want to show you is actually this one sitting right here, which is Little People, Big Dreams, Jane Austen, written by Ma Elizabeth Sanchez Vergara, illustrated by Katie Wilson. And it's basically just a illustrated history of Jane Austen, which is just really sweet and really cute. So it tells us about Jane Austen's family, got some really lovely painted images, what it was like growing up in her family, and it tells us how, because Jane's father ran the local school, even though girls didn't necessarily get that kind of education in those days, she did because her father ran the school. It tells us about her love of books and reading, and then tells us about her experiences that inspired her to write Pride and Prejudice. I just think these pictures are just adorable, and I love this for an ending. Jane went on to write 7 novels full of grace and talent. Yeah, she did. Little did she know that one day she would be considered one of the greatest writers in the world. Little Jane would be happy that the books she once wrote are the ones we still love reading today. And then at the end, it's got a timeline for Jane Austen with a bit more information. Such an adorable book. It's such a cool idea. And I think it's a really nice way of introducing children to historical figures. I am a massive Jane Austen fan, so I had to get this book, and I haven't yet read it in a class, but I'm hoping to at some point. And I'm really excited to buy some more because there are actually quite a few more. of these books. So you can see on the back page it tells you some other of the titles. So there's Coco Chanel, Marie Curie, Rosa Parks, Ada Lovelace, Harriet Tubman, Agatha Christie, Amelia Earhart, Ella Fitzgerald, Audrey Hepburn. Yeah, so there's some really, Maya Angelou, some really fascinating female historical figures. Alright guys, so that is the end of this video for today. If you like the look of any of these books, please comment below and let me know what you think of them. And yeah, thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope that you found it interesting and valuable. If you did, please give me a thumbs up, consider subscribing to my channel, and I'll see you later.